Have you ever wondered if your avoidant ex or partner actually regrets losing you, even when they act like nothing ever touched them? You see them calm, composed, detached, almost as if the entire relationship never meant anything. But what if that calmness is just a disguise for something deeper? What if, behind that cool silence, there's a quiet ache they don't know how to express? Avoidants are masters of emotional control. They protect themselves by pretending they don't feel. So when they lose someone who truly mattered, someone who understood their fears, their walls, their silence, they don't react the way most people would. They don't beg, they don't chase, they don't break down, they retreat. But deep down that loss doesn't disappear, it lingers. It sits in the corners of their mind, surfacing in moments they can't predict, like a song, a memory, or a random glimpse of your name. That's the part they can't control. That's where regret begins. What makes this kind of regret so complex is that avoidants don't process it through words, they process it through avoidance. They'll tell themselves, it's better this way, or I needed space. But over time space becomes silence, and silence becomes loneliness. And that's when the realization starts to creep in, that the very distance they created has now become the thing they hate most. They start to notice small reminders of you, your tone, your calmness, your patience, all the things they once took for granted. They might even feel a strange kind of confusion. Why can't I move on if I wanted this? Because the truth is, they didn't want to lose you, they just wanted to feel safe from the intensity of connection. Avoidants don't express regret through emotional breakdowns, they express it through hesitation, overthinking, and quiet observation. They start replaying moments in their mind, the times you understood them without judgment, the comfort of your presence, the way you didn't demand, just cared. And when that realization hits, that no one else makes them feel that understood, it stings in a way that's hard for them to admit. This is why avoidant regret often goes unnoticed. It's not loud, not dramatic, not obvious. It's silent, slow, and deeply internal. But once it takes root, it changes the way they see connection forever. In this video, we'll uncover the 5 undeniable signs that an avoidant regrets losing that one special person, the one they couldn't replace, no matter how hard they tried. The first act that shows an avoidant regrets losing you, they try to stay in touch. Now on the surface, it might look simple, or even meaningless. After the breakup, they'll say things like, let's stay friends, or I still want you in my life somehow. You might even think they're just being polite or trying to soften the ending. But for an avoidant, those few words carry much more weight than they let on. You have to understand, avoidants are wired to detach when things feel emotionally overwhelming. Once they pull away, they rarely maintain contact unless something deep inside them is still holding on. So when they reach out, when they leave a message, or even just watch your story quietly, it's not random. It's their version of saying, I'm not ready to come close, but I can't bear to lose you completely. You might notice small gestures. They'll check up on you out of nowhere, send a hope you're doing okay, or comment lightly on something you posted. They might even initiate harmless conversations that go nowhere, asking about your work, your pet, or something casual. But beneath that surface, there's a quiet emotional thread they're terrified to cut. Because once that thread breaks, it means it's really over. And for an avoidant, finality feels suffocating. The irony is, they often left because intimacy scared them. Yet once you're gone, it's the absence that starts haunting them. The silence that once felt safe now feels unfamiliar, even painful. They'll scroll through your old messages, maybe replay a few old moments in their mind, and tell themselves they're just checking in, when really they're craving the emotional comfort they lost. This is how avoidant regret starts to show itself. It's never direct. They won't confess, I miss you. They'll hover instead, staying close enough to feel connected, but far enough to stay emotionally safe. It's their way of managing guilt, longing, and pride all at once. You might even see them act casual when they reach out, pretending it's no big deal. But what's really happening underneath is emotional dissonance. They want connection, but they're afraid of vulnerability. They want your presence, but not the intensity that comes with it. So instead of choosing between distance or closeness, they settle for access. They stay in touch, not because they're ready to rebuild something, but because they miss the calm and security you brought into their life. You represented emotional stability, something they didn't realize they needed until you were gone. And once they feel that contrast between your presence and your absence, they start to understand what they've lost. So if your avoidant ex still tries to maintain contact through small gestures, random texts or quiet digital presence, don't dismiss it as meaningless. It's often their clumsy way of saying, I still care, I just don't know how to show it. Because for an avoidant, staying in touch is never just about friendship, it's about holding on to the one bond they silently regret breaking. The second act that truly reveals when an avoidant regrets losing you is this: they start showing care but never in a straightforward way. You'll rarely hear them say, I miss you or I'm sorry for what happened. Instead, they use small indirect gestures to express emotions they can't handle speaking out loud. For an avoidant, vulnerability equals danger, so even when regret floods in, their instinct is to disguise affection as casual concern. You might see it in the smallest things. They'll message you randomly asking, hey, are you okay, or did you eat today? Maybe they comment on something you posted, you look tired, are you sleeping enough? It seems harmless, even ordinary, but it's not. Those little check-ins are emotional smoke signals, subtle signs of guilt, curiosity, and care, all tangled together. It's their way of saying, I still notice you without having to admit, I still miss you. For avoidance, showing care indirectly feels safer than expressing it directly. They convince themselves they're just being polite or thoughtful, but what's really happening is emotional leakage. The very feelings they tried to suppress after the breakup start to resurface in cautious, quiet ways. They'll like an old picture, watch your story moments after it's posted, or mention a detail about your life that you didn't even realize they remembered. Those are not random actions, they're breadcrumbs of regret. This behavior often confuses the person on the other side. You might think, if they care, why don't they say it? The truth is, they do care, but guilt makes them hesitant. Avoidants fear emotional exposure, so instead of saying I still think about you, they'll show it by worrying if you made it home safe, or casually reminding you of an inside joke you shared months ago. It's their awkward attempt to reconnect without risking rejection. Their tone might even feel softer than before, calmer, more grounded, because regret humbles them. The same person who once seemed cold now shows glimpses of warmth, but only in doses they can emotionally manage. They hover around your world, not fully stepping in but refusing to disappear completely. That's how regret looks when avoidants are too scared to name it. You'll also notice that these gestures often come during quiet moments, not during fights or big emotional conversations. It's when things have gone still that their guilt starts whispering to them. They might check your profile late at night, send a small take care text, or show up in subtle digital ways, not to reopen the relationship, but to ease the ache of disconnection. When an avoidant regrets losing you, their love language transforms. It's no longer about being present, it's about watching over you from afar. Regret doesn't make them expressive, it makes them cautious. So instead of reaching for closeness, they express care from the edges, not because they stopped loving, but because they're still too afraid to feel it fully. That's the quiet irony of avoidant regret. They want to protect what they lost, but they can only do it from a distance. The third act, and one of the most telling signs that an avoidant truly regrets losing you, is when they begin to demonstrate personal growth. This isn't about a sudden dramatic confession or an overly emotional apology. It's subtle, steady, and entirely behavioral. Avoidants often hide behind emotional walls, so when they start addressing their shortcomings on their own, it's a clear signal that something inside has shifted. You might notice small but consistent changes in their daily habits or mindset. Maybe they've started reading books about emotional intelligence, mindfulness, or communication. Perhaps they've enrolled in workshops or started journaling to process their feelings. Even minor shifts, like actively listening to others, being more punctual, or responding to situations with less defensiveness, can indicate a deep, internal recalibration. They're learning from the past, not just reacting to it. For example, someone who would previously avoid difficult conversations may now engage calmly and thoughtfully. They may stop deflecting blame and begin reflecting on their part in conflicts. A person who once ignored emotional cues might now notice when someone is upset and take quiet action to understand before reacting. These aren't grand gestures, they're small, intentional, and consistent behaviors that reveal a growing awareness of their impact on others. The essence of avoidant personal growth is self-driven. They don't do it for applause, recognition, or even to win you back. Instead, it's guilt combined with realization. the kind of self-awareness that arrives when they recognize they pushed away someone who genuinely valued and understood them. They begin asking themselves hard questions. Why did I act that way? How can I be better? What patterns have I repeated that hurt the people I care about? This growth often shows up in practical ways. Maybe they've started managing stress better, becoming more reliable, or developing healthier routines that support emotional balance. Perhaps they reach out to repair professional or personal relationships they previously neglected. All of this reflects an internal acknowledgement that they can't simply ignore the consequences of their past actions. Regret becomes a catalyst for improvement. What makes this so powerful is that avoidants rarely verbalize regret directly. They struggle to say, "I was wrong," but they allow their actions to carry the weight of the message. These changes are not about immediate reconciliation. They're about internal alignment, an acknowledgement of past mistakes, and a demonstration that they're capable of growth. When an avoidant engages in personal growth after losing someone significant, it signals that the loss impacted them deeply. They're learning to confront their fears, own their patterns, and become someone who could potentially sustain a healthier, more respectful connection in the future. Their evolution is silent but unmistakable, a testament to the fact that regret doesn't always come with words, but it often leads to meaningful change. The fourth act that clearly signals an avoidant's regret is when they offer unexpected apologies. For someone with avoidant tendencies, saying, "I'm sorry" is rarely simple. Apologizing requires lowering their defenses, admitting vulnerability, and confronting feelings they usually suppress, all of which feels uncomfortable, even threatening. So when an avoidant reaches out with a genuine apology, it carries far more emotional weight than the words themselves might suggest. You might receive a text or a message out of the blue, "I realize I hurt you, and I'm sorry for that." Or perhaps they say something like, "I shouldn't have said those things, it wasn't fair to you." Even if the timing seems odd, or the wording feels hesitant, it's important to understand the courage behind it. Avoidants rarely confront conflict head-on, so offering an apology, unprompted, is their way of acknowledging guilt without fully exposing their emotions. Sometimes the apology comes disguised in casual phrasing, almost as if they're testing the waters. Phrases like, "I hope we're okay," or "I didn't mean to make things awkward," are often their indirect way of expressing remorse. They might not use the word regret explicitly, but their intent is clear. They recognize they caused pain and are attempting to bridge the emotional gap without triggering their own discomfort. Avoidants may also use small gestures alongside words, trying to demonstrate contrition without making it confrontational. A simple check-in, acknowledging a past argument, or clarifying a misunderstanding can all function as subtle forms of apology. It's their method of reconciling internal guilt while keeping a safe emotional distance. These acts are rarely loud or dramatic. They're quiet, controlled, and deliberate, reflecting the avoidant's characteristic struggle with vulnerability. What makes these apologies so revealing is the internal battle behind them. On the surface, an avoidant may appear calm, collected, or even indifferent. But underneath they are grappling with the consequences of their past actions and the recognition that their behavior cost them someone significant. Offering an apology, even in small increments, is their way of confronting these feelings without completely dismantling the walls they've built around themselves. This act of reaching out is never just about etiquette or politeness. It is a genuine acknowledgement of the impact they had on you and an attempt, however cautious, to reconcile with it. They're not seeking validation or forgiveness necessarily, they're confronting their own emotional discomfort and allowing themselves to feel the weight of regret. So when an avoidant offers an apology out of the blue, it's a signal that they are finally acknowledging their mistakes and taking tentative steps toward accountability. It's their silent admission that they recognize what they lost, and that even though they may never verbalize all their feelings, the attempt itself is a profound indicator of remorse and internal change. Finally, when the regret becomes too strong to ignore, an avoidant will begin to subtly try to reconnect. This isn't a grand gesture or a dramatic confession. It's quiet, calculated, and very cautious. Avoidants are experts at maintaining emotional distance, so when they reach out after a breakup or period of disconnection, it's usually in small, tentative ways that test your openness and receptivity. You might notice it starts online, with a brief reaction to one of your posts or a casual comment on a story. It could be a message as simple as, "Hope you had a good weekend," or an unexpected note about a shared memory, like "I drove past that coffee shop we liked." On the surface, these may seem like coincidences or casual interactions, but they carry a deeper emotional intent. It's their way of probing whether it's safe to re-enter your emotional space without triggering confrontation or vulnerability. Sometimes the attempts to reconnect are physical, in situations where social circumstances allow. Perhaps they happen to show up where you are, join a mutual event, or cross paths in a way that feels accidental but is actually deliberate. Avoidants often avoid direct vulnerability, so they create opportunities to observe and interact indirectly, gauging your reaction before fully engaging. Every smile, casual word, or gentle acknowledgement is a measure of whether they can risk deeper connection. Their tone is different from before, softer, less defensive, and noticeably calmer. There are no arguments, no attempts to justify past behavior, no ego-driven defenses. Instead, it's warmth tempered with hesitation, as if they're carefully walking on thin ice, afraid of falling into old patterns that might push you away again. They might say, "I was thinking about that time or remember that day at the park." These references aren't just nostalgia, they're tentative invitations to emotionally reconnect, signals that they recognize your presence still matters to them. Behind every subtle action lies careful reflection. Avoidants replay past interactions, analyzing where they went wrong, and imagining how you might respond if they re-enter your life. Regret fuels these reflections, blending guilt with longing, creating a cautious curiosity. Would they respond positively? Could we rebuild something? Each step is measured, because the last thing they want is to repeat mistakes that cost them the relationship in the first place. Every subtle attempt is a silent plea, an unspoken hope that you still see value in them despite past hurts. They may never openly admit, "I regret losing you," but their behavior communicates it unmistakably. They approach with caution, respect boundaries implicitly, and seek emotional permission before fully engaging. This delicate balancing act is their unique way of expressing remorse, not through words but through actions carefully designed to reconnect while protecting themselves from the vulnerability that comes with true emotional exposure. Avoidants who are quietly trying to reconnect after regret are showing the complexity of their inner world, guilt, reflection, longing, and fear, all combined. They're not asking for immediate forgiveness or instant closeness, they're testing, learning, and moving carefully. Recognizing these subtle moves is crucial for understanding that beneath the emotional walls, regret and care still exist, guiding every tentative step back toward you. If you've noticed these signs, don't ignore your instincts. Avoidants rarely express their emotions in words, but regret seeps through their actions, revealing a quiet internal struggle. They may react, reach out subtly, or show minor changes in behavior, and while it's tempting to read too much into these gestures, it's important to separate their guilt from their readiness to fully engage. Regret does not automatically mean they're capable of providing the love, respect, or consistency you truly deserve. You can recognize their attempts to make amends without reopening old wounds or compromising your peace of mind. It's possible to acknowledge subtle changes, reflect on their growth, and still maintain your boundaries. Your healing doesn't hinge on their words or acknowledgement. True emotional restoration begins when you understand that your value was never determined by their mistakes or delayed realizations. Even if they realize the depth of their loss late, your clarity, self-respect, and emotional strength can't wait for them. You hold the power to reclaim your energy, protect your heart, and prioritize your peace. Their regret may be genuine, but it's your choice whether it affects you or shifts your focus. By setting boundaries and trusting your intuition, you take control of your narrative and your emotional well-being. Remember, closure is internal, not dependent on someone else's timing or confessions. Your worth, your peace, and your growth exist independently of an avoidance delayed remorse. The moment you acknowledge this, you step into your own power, and nothing, not guilt, not apology, not regret, can take that away from you. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more insights into avoidant behavior and emotional dynamics, and comment below sharing which sign you recognized in your own experiences. Your story matters, and this community is here to help you navigate it.